Welcome everyone to this session of Cloud Activate. It's a pleasure to welcome you all. My name is Vasco Afonso. I am the head of Cloud and Cybersecurity business units in Claranet, Portugal, and it was a pleasure for us to prepare this particular session where we are going to focus on cybersecurity. It's not a surprise that nowadays the probably the number one concern for the organizations today, it's cyber attacks. I would ask kindly if all of the participants could put your microphone on mute. Okay, thank you very much. And so cybersecurity is probably the biggest concern nowadays, and it's and there is some reasons for that. Recent studies show that most of the downtimes and that data losses that are caused in our organizations are not due to physical problems with the data center or the hardware or the software, but related with cyber attacks. So it's a huge concern, and we should all be prepared to face this new era of cyber attacks. Luckily, we have the platforms, the tools, and the expertise to cope with that and to be better prepared to prevent, mitigate those kind of threats. So with me, I have Pedro Sousa, Miguel Nunes, and our hacker of estimation, which I will not say the name. The guy is known by Lord V. And we have prepared a special session for you, so I hope you enjoy it. And questions, please let us put it at the end, because since this is going to be a recorded session, we can open the discussion in the end, so we can have the video of the session before, so we can expand this and put it online. Okay, so thank you. And Pedro, Miguel, and Lord V, the stage is yours.
Hi Vasco, good morning, and thank you for the introduction, and welcome you guys to this session about hack versus protect. As Vasco said, security nowadays it's a huge concern of companies, and we plan to show you some simple things that you can do to enhance your security posture. And also we'll have some fun with our hacker, breaking things and show you guys how to mitigate those actions. About me, my name, as Vasco said, is Pedro Sousa. I'm the Azure Tech Lead at BizDirect, and I'm also a Microsoft Azure MVP for the past 4 years. One of my focus areas is security. But nowadays I work not also on security, but also on other Azure workloads. I'm here joined by my colleague, Miguel.
Hello there. My name is Miguel Nunes. I'm the Security Operations Manager for Claranet, Portugal. That means everything security-wise, offensive and defensive, is managed by my team and my colleagues. In this demo, we are going to share some of our expertise with you guys and see if we can tackle the present threats that we face today. Pedro?
So, what have we planned for a simple demo? We created a web app, an app service with an app that's called Damn Vulnerable Web Application. Just to show you guys, this is a simple tool that you can use. It's open source, so you can look at the source code, and it's used mainly for testing and learning purposes. Okay, so we created this web app on Azure with a MySQL backend as the database, and we're going to show you guys with this simple application some typical attacks that you can have on a web app. To protect this web app, we created also in front of the web app, we've created a WAF, an application gateway with an application firewall that is going to detect those attacks. We haven't configured the WAF to be on prevention mode, just on detection, because at this moment, for the demo purposes, we don't want to block these attacks. Okay, but just to make sure, we could also configure it as prevention, and that would stop many of the attacks that we are going to show you guys. Okay, but we don't want to. We want to detect. We want to log those attacks to log analytics, and later on we're going to grab those details from log analytics and show you guys on Sentinel, Azure Sentinel, that the alerts and the incidents will be created also on Azure Sentinel. For the demo purposes, and because there's a small delay between data being logged to log analytics and being displayed on Azure Sentinel, and this is at most 5-minute delay. Okay, we already this morning we already kicked the tires and created some incidents so that you guys can see those attacks on Sentinel. Miguel, back to you.
So why Azure Sentinel, or why a solution like this? Basically, Azure Sentinel is designed from scratch for a cloud enterprise, and it eliminates all types of maintenance needed on typical on-prem appliances. On-prem appliances always has concern with CPU consumption and RAM consumption, and even storage consumption if we want to archive logs for much more time than the default that the base appliance provides. Obviously, the storage concerns are also a concern on Azure, as you are well aware, but it's, well, easier to scale up. It's just the press of a button and some cache. There's a very easy integration with Microsoft tools, and most workloads on pretty much all enterprises nowadays are consumed with these tool sets. And that integration is completely seamless, and it can be done in just a few minutes, as we will demonstrate. That integration is also free out of the box, unless you surpass the free tier limits, which are quite generous. We are talking about 60 days data retention with 35 gigabytes storage per month. So it's quite, unless we are talking about organizations that have more than 1,000 people, you probably won't hit those free tier limits. Also, as you are well aware, the machine learning capabilities of Azure and its engine are quite good at the moment. They are one of the leading players in this field. We are talking about machine learning towards and AI towards computer recognition and knowledge. So the correlation of this CM is actually quite good, and one of the best in the market at the moment. And it can pretty much integrate with anything. If we are not keeping cost in mind, we can integrate with pretty much all vendors, or common vendors, that is, that we can use on our facilities on-prem. We are talking about Cisco, Palo Alto, checkpoints, etc., etc. Another feature that's quite generous of them, they do native malware and URL detonation out of the box without needing any type of add-on of sandbox features. And from a incident response standpoint and a threat analysis standpoint, this is quite useful. So if one of our users clicks something that they shouldn't have clicked, or if they download something that they shouldn't, we can always preview directly on Azure Sentinel what that thing was, and that eliminates quite a few false positives or or confirms true positives that we suspect. Normally, this feature on traditional CMs is quite expensive.
Miguel, sorry
Yes,
to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
But you said that we can integrate with on-prem. But
Yes.
Can we also integrate with other cloud vendors?
We can actually. Out of the box, we already have integrations with AWS. There are some developments being made to Google Cloud Engine as well. Those are still in preview, if I'm not mistaken, at this stage, but there's work definitely being done there. So
cool.
With AWS, we can integrate all types of CloudTrail and CloudWatch sources. We can even integrate Security Hub and GuardDuty, mind you. So we can aggregate all types of incidents in one single point or one single CM if we so desire.
But we can also integrate with other CMs, if I'm not sure.
We can integrate with on-prem CMs. Azure Sentinel exposes its API quite generously if we configure it. And this is no secret. In Claranet, we also use 40CM, and we can integrate 40CM with Azure and load all the incidents from Azure Sentinel on 40CM and the other way around as well, if we so desire. So depending on what type of architecture the customer has, we can actually fit the best tool for the purpose. Sometimes it makes sense to consume those incidents on Azure Sentinel. Sometimes it makes sense to consume it on-prem. But if we go through that way, we begin to talk about cost analysis and cost tooling, and we get to the less technical side of things and the more economic side of things. But there's definitely possibilities, and there's definitely work being done there, and it's actually something that we offer to our customers, and we are not the only ones nowadays. Thank you for the question, Pedro. Quite good. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to talk about why hackers do what they do. Why are they on this game? So basically, they do this because, well, it's profitable. That's the whole reason, really. If it wasn't profitable, people wouldn't do what they do, because from a risk standpoint, it's quite harsh. This is quite. Most ransomware attacks are, as you know, quite illegal by their nature. Not only because they are interfering on the daily operations of a company, but also blackmail that is involved with the unlocking of your systems. But the thing is, sadly, since last year, there's been a boom, as you can see, on payments on the top 10 more common groups of ransomwares or variants of ransomwares. So while this trend is going upwards, these types of attacks and these types of acts, and I'm talking about solely on ransomware now, is going to increase. But the thing is, attacks are not limited to ransomware. And I dare say that ransomware is the last stage of a persistent threat nowadays. Normally, what we see is groups that create a persistent access to your company, and they exfiltrate data, sometimes quite quickly, sometimes slowly, and try, depending on the type of company, try to intercept your daily operations, try to do some types of wire fraud. So that means try to impersonate a CFO or a financial controller to convince one of your partners to pay a bill that's actually fictitious, so they can steal money from your third parties. They can steal your customer data, so they can fish them out, or they can sell their metadata in bulk in the dark web, so they can be attacked by lesser or minor groups. There's a lot of money to be made. That's the cold hard truth. And the thing is, every person that manages an organization nowadays or a company is at risk. And if we don't create monitoring and response methodologies, there may be someone inside your network as we speak doing the things that I just described, trying to do some recon on your network, try to steal some sensitive data or reach the sensitive data to steal, so they can sell that metadata, so they can blackmail you, and in the end, who knows, maybe sell the access to your infrastructure to one of these ransomware groups and deploy the ransomware so they can blackmail you and gain a little bit more cash on your behalf in the end. I would like to show and to prove precisely how you can have a persistent threat and not even being aware of it. So I'll ask Lord V to share his screen. What you're seeing is an attacking machine that Lord V is sharing, and he's going to create an implant on a target machine that is quite vulnerable. This machine, mind you, is a modern operating system. It's patched, but even so, it's vulnerable to his attack. Obviously, there's no. We are doing a little bit of. I'm being a little bit dishonest. There's no Microsoft Defender active on it at the moment, so we are not doing the injection of something that can diffuse Microsoft Defender or any other type of antivirus software. But what he just did was he created a session on an implant on that machine, and it just basically the person opened Internet Explorer, a command shell popped out for like a few seconds. You probably didn't notice it. And he basically has full control of the machine. He just listed a directory on that machine, opened that passwords file that is on the desktop. Sadly, some people's notion of security and password keeping is a text file, but that's another conversation for another time. And he just opened the calculator remotely, and he can basically do whatever he wants with the system. He can even steal your passwords, even if he doesn't compromise your account. Basically, he can dump he can dump all the ashes of all accounts that have been logged into that computer, and with the ashes, he can basically reverse them and see what the password is in clear text as well. And there's the password, basically. So this happened. The user, if he didn't launch the calculator, the user wouldn't be none the wiser. Basically, he wouldn't have any idea that someone was messing with his computer, downloading his files, and seeing his passwords. And from here, basically, we have an account name, we have a computer name, we have these passwords, the text file. So we can probably do anything with that person. We basically, like they say in offensive security, we own them. So imagine in those passwords file if there's a banking information from that person, so we can just transfer funds to somewhere else. There's no easy where there's no easy chargeback policies. So now imagine if this person belonged to an organization of thousands of people, and from here a sysadmin had to do some maintenance work on this computer, and exactly with the strategy that we just proved, we could have dumped the password of a sysadmin that has elevated privileges, and from there we can just pivot to another machine or to another accounts that have more elevated privileges and just do whatever we want with the organization. So we can access the file share unrestrictedly, download all the data from HR, all the confidential data that we want. So there's no stopping us at this stage. Obviously, there are a few things that we could have done to stop this. Not everything is doom and gloom, as we like to say. If we had like a next-gen solution, a defensive solution like an EDR client, or if we had a more tightened, patched system with some monitoring tools, we at least would have been aware of what was happening. So in here, we actually have a licensed Microsoft Defender armed with the new policies. And basically, as soon as he opens, there's no connection being made. And if we try to drag the executable, it will be deleted quite quickly. And the thing is, we actually have a CM monitoring this machine, and you'll see on the CM side that we actually monitored everything that Lord V just did was monitored by our agents. So thank you, Lord V, for this demonstration. For now, that's it. I'm going to share my screen now. And I would like to welcome you to Azure Sentinel. So this is a demo subscription. There's a few dummy events, but most of the data that we are seeing here was generated in the past few days by our testing for this demo purposes and what Lord V just did. What is Azure Sentinel? Like I said, it's a next generation CM, cloud-based CM built out of the box on Azure. And there are a few notions before we explain what we can do with it that I would like to present to you. So basically, Azure Sentinel can be deployed as code. It's a very fast deployment, and it can be turned on if you just own a valid Azure subscription. And even if you don't, if you only have a 365 subscription, you can ask for a trial period for it. And Microsoft is more than happy to give one to you. So Azure Sentinel is based on three main pillars to collect data. We have the data connectors, which is what Azure Sentinel is going to connect to, and what is going to feed data to the machine. Basically, data can be lifted directly by Azure Sentinel on different apps that you have installed on 365 for Azure. So basically, you can lift Azure Activity data, Office 365 data, Microsoft Cloud App Security data out of the box without you configuring anything else. You just need to mind. You just need to have the right privileges, obviously, which is, in this case, security administrator. And for some operations, you may need a global admin to do the configuration initially. And there are other types of connectors where you need to have a monitoring agent or an Azure agent somewhere that parses the data to Azure Sentinel. So those types of things is if you want to lift security log data from a machine outside of Azure, you will need the Microsoft monitoring agent there connected to Azure Sentinel. If you want to parse something out of syslog from a firewall, like an on-prem checkpoint or an on-prem Palo Alto, you'll need to have a middleman machine. Typically, we use Unix machines that can have only like 2 CPUs and 4 gigabytes of RAM to install rsyslog or syslog ng, depending on what flavor you prefer, and the open Microsoft agent that will import the data towards Azure Sentinel. But those are basically, yes, Pedro.
Probably we could show one data connector. What do you say?
Yeah, I'm working towards it. I was just making sure people know what we are about to see. And as Pedro is pointing out, the data connectors, they sometimes, oh, don't tell me my session expired. That would be grand. There we go. Basically, the data connectors that we have here all are using either direct connection to Azure Sentinel. So we are ceding privileges to be on other Microsoft platforms or other on-cloud Microsoft platforms, or the security events via legacy agent. We could have used the security events itself. There are 2 connectors for this, one that seeds basically if you have machines on Azure itself, virtual machines on Azure itself, you can uplift those logs directly to Sentinel without the use of the agent. So basically, the Azure agent itself can do that for you without the Microsoft monitoring agent. But for this demo, we decided to use the legacy agent, and I'll explain why soon enough. The configuration of a data connector is quite easy. So basically, I can open any type of connector. So the 365, this account of mine doesn't have the normal tenant privileges that are needed for the prerequisites. But as you can see, Azure Sentinel itself lists what you need to install the data connector. The configuration is quite direct and quite simple. So basically in Office 365 activity logs, you can decide to import only Exchange or only Teams if you want, or all three. There are no penalties on it. And it's totally free as well. And basically, the next steps, he suggests what type of workbooks you want. Workbooks are basically what you use for, there are two purposes for it. Not only they are useful for threat investigation, so you can see what you are actually collecting from it without going to the log analytics or the log sources. And they can also be very useful for some KPIs. So basically, some workbooks are more towards to a management type of personality, so they can see how many events they are generating. Even you actually have workbooks for cost analysis from Azure Sentinel as well, so you can predict what type of costs you are incurring on Azure Sentinel. And some are actually very useful for incident response or threat analysis, or even risk assessment, where you can just predict what type of events are reaching us, not predict, see what type of events are reaching us, and assess what type of risk we are seeing from each user or each machine or anything relevant like that. The query samples are queries that are useful for our querying our logs to see our events coming to us. These query samples are automatically saved as queries on our log analytics, and the relevant analytics templates. These are basically our use cases, if you are familiar with other types of CMs. So basically, these are the rule sets that are going to trigger incidents. As you are quite aware, we are collecting events. Those events are being sorted by alerts or not alerts, basically, if they are discarded. There's a correlation between events, and depending on what type of analytic rules we have, if those correlated events trigger any of these conditions, we create an incident. This is valid for Azure Sentinel or any type of CM out there. They all work the same way. So from here, I could have created one rule. I'm going to create a random rule. Well, it can be this one. So creating a rule is quite simple as well. We basically have the details of the rule itself. We can change the severity if we think this is not something that's going to affect our organization. So this is actually a template one based on IOCs that targeted SolarWinds. This happened a few months ago. This is not the solar burst attack. This is the follow-up attack that happened a few months ago. So basically, we don't use SolarWinds on our organization, so we can switch this to informational if we want, but let's leave it at high. We have the rule logic, which basically gives us the mappings of what variables we are using, and the code itself. The code itself has a few errors. Sometimes this is the demo gods sometimes like to toy with us, but basically Microsoft is always iterating on its products, and sometimes the source code gets a few variables change name and the source code is not updated, but we can easily do so. Basically, what we are seeing here is basically this destination IP and IP list is not a common variable anymore. It's basically IP custom entity, and we can switch it out one for the other, and the errors will disappear. So I sure know how to pick them. And we can change the query scheduling as well. Basically, CMs don't work real time. The collection of data is always inside of a tick rate or a pull rate, and that pull rate is going to determine when the data is analyzed or collected, if we are actually going to the source to collect the data. And the query itself that's going to see if there's an incident or not runs every few minutes, every few hours, every few days, depending on what type of query we are doing and what type of alert we are looking for. So we can change that pulling time. So the query can be every 5 minutes if we so desire. And we can look up data from the last 6 hours. So we correlate every data, every 5 minutes we are running the query and we are looking at data that we collected 6 hours ago. And the alert threshold, basically this is like some sanitization properties. So if we want, we can leave this at 0. So that means if an alert is triggered, it will create an incident. But imagine if it's something that we know it's a standard procedure. So for example, imagine we have a use case on SharePoint that if someone opens too many SharePoint files, we get an alarm or an incident, sorry. We can leave this alert threshold. So imagine the alert is opening a SharePoint file. That's not malicious activity normally, but if that person opens in 5 minutes, if he opens 1,000 SharePoint files, that's probably a bot crawling on our network. So we probably want to know that. So we can do this 2 ways. We can hard code that variable on our code. So basically say that this is only an incident if it triggers, if the count is higher than 1,000 times, or we can do this on the configure the code to be every time someone opens a file and leave the alert threshold to 1,000. So both ways are valid. There are some discussions which one is more compliant, but that's out of the scope of this conversation. The incident. Yes, Pedro.
Can I interrupt you? Sorry, guy.
Of course, always.
I saw on the logic, the rule logic, there was a GitHub reference on top of that logic.
Yes.
So
basically, this GitHub reference is all the rule sets that have IOCs always reference a feed of data. In this case, this feed of data is coming from this raw GitHub, which is basically the IOCs themselves. As you can see, these are the IOCs themselves that are being used on this query. The way IOCs work in Azure Sentinel can be in one of 2 ways. We can have in threat intelligence, we can have all the IOCs presented there, and all the rule sets are going to go to map towards those IOCs. Or we can have actually IOCs built in the code itself, the analytics code itself. In this case, because Microsoft can't inject threat intelligence out of the box in Microsoft Sentinel, when they provide rule templates with IOCs, they always do it like this.
Okay, so this is dynamic, right? Microsoft will curate these IOCs and this.
It can be Microsoft or it can be the community itself. Microsoft's GitHub for Azure Sentinel at the moment has more than 300 contributors. Not all of them are Microsoft employees. So the person that's curating this CSV can be a Microsoft employee or someone else. But normally they keep up to date normally. That's at least my experience. Thank you for the question. So on the automated response, we can create automation rules on our triggers, on our analytics. So imagine this was, if this wasn't an IEC rule set, if this was like, if we see a login from Portugal and another login simultaneously from China. So that suggests the account has been compromised. We can, if this triggers, we can block the the user account on Azure AD. So it forces him or her to talk with our with the IT team and sorts him out. These alerts automation can be done for other purposes. For example, if we want to integrate Azure Sentinel with another type of ticketing system, we do that with automation normally. So basically, every time an alert is created or an incident is created, we do a copy of that incident to ServiceNow or to Jira or EasyVista or whatever you use, and leave the breadcrumb on the source code. Most of ETSMs nowadays support Azure Sentinel API as well. So if we leave that breadcrumb in the code, basically every time the incident is closed on ServiceNow, and if it's properly integrated with Azure Sentinel as well, the incident will be closed on Azure Sentinel as well. This works with pretty much the main vendors of ETSMs nowadays, or ticketing systems. I know a few emerging ones and a few free ones are being supported now as we speak. They are in the preview catalog, so they should be on. They should be on the store soon enough. So basically, lastly, we do a review, and basically he substituted those variables with the correct one, and he validates the code, he validates the what type of actions we are doing, and that's it. That's an analytics rule I created. Now, I just done this manually, and I took like almost 10 minutes explaining what I just did. Could have this been done quicker? Well, yes, it could. We could have done this as code as well. So basically, what we are seeing now is a PowerShell script that deploys an Azure Sentinel out of the box and deploys all the analytic rules for Office 365. Well, pretty much what you saw configured in my screen back then. And just running this code, it takes about 7 to 10 minutes, and it will configure all data connectors that I just shown you, and all the rule sets, default rule sets of analytics that I was showing you as well. This code can be iterated upon. It can be you can just run parts of it if you want. So basically, if you don't want to create analytics rules one by one, you can just inject those configurations on Azure Sentinel for that specific data connector and those specific analytic rules. Managing the Azure Sentinel manually is quite simple, but to manage it efficiently by code is definitely the way to go, in our opinion.
Miguel, if I understood correctly, when we go to our customers to implement Azure Sentinel, we do infrastructure as code and we deploy it in 5 to 7 minutes.
Basically, yes. There are, I'm not going to lie, there are a few specific things that you can't do as code. For example, on-prem appliances you need to do manually, but those are the exception, not the rule.
Okay, but the basis is all automated and it's quite fast, 7 minutes. Whoa.
Yeah, it is. It's quite efficient. Just before passing back to Pedro, like I said, we were watching Lord V all along with Azure Sentinel, and we can see our incidents here. So basically, we identified the MetaPerter post-exploitation tool, ran on our VM, our test VM. We actually know what executable he was using, and we actually have the ashes that he lifted. So we actually know that that VM was compromised with MetaPerter, and we actually know the accounts, the ashes of the accounts that were compromised. So how can you prevent hackers? Well, either you watch them with a tool like this, or you prevent them with a tool like EDR or any type of aggressive patching policies as well. Those are the two main ways. Obviously, 0 days are still a thing, and there are still ways that if a user is creative enough, not to use another term, and actually just bundles everything and does everything that you shouldn't do from a security standpoint, you may, and if he has privileges that you shouldn't have, especially like that, there are ways that you can still get compromised, sadly. But Azure Sentinel will catch it. And by Azure Sentinel, I mean any type of CM will catch it if it's properly configured.
But
so,
even with 0 days, if I remember correctly, past March, we had a 0 day on Exchange servers.
yes.
And actually, Azure Sentinel was quite fast. In a couple of hours, I don't remember, 4, 5, 6 hours, they provided the analytics queries and analytics rules to check if we were compromised and then take action. So even with 0 days, they are quite fast.
In that specific case, I can do you one better. If you were watching for uncommon or suspicious behavior on Exchange, we actually had a customer that we saw a suspicious aspects injected on an Exchange. We had no idea what it was, but we knew it was there. And we actually recommended the customer to delete it. And lo and behold, 24 hours later, a 0 day was disclosed. So if you are watching broadly, you can pretty much pick up things that are not disclosed at the moment. Now, I'm not saying that this is like magical. It's not. Especially if you are looking to the whole forest, sometimes you don't look at the right trees. That definitely happens. There's something to be said of having too many data sources, but knowing how to parse those data sources it's actually quite good enough skill. That actually touches on the threat hunting part of things and the analytics part of things that I will talk later on this session. Pedro, I think you had something to talk about web applications as well, right?
Yeah, I do. But before I take over the session, I just want to point out to you guys that if you notice, we had 98,000 events while doing our kick the tires demo prep. So in a real scenario, this can be millions of events, and it's impossible for a human to as Miguel said, and I like the expression, look at the forest and find that rotten tree in the middle. So, but let me share my screen for a moment. Then I'm going to give it up to our hacker, just to do a quick show of our scenario. So, related to the web app. Why have we chosen the web app? Well, because it's one of the most used services in Azure, along with virtual machines. So what you've seen before was a compromise of virtual machines. They could be hosted on Azure, they could be hosted on-prem. And now this scenario is about the web app. Why have we chosen this web app? Well, it's one of the apps used for training for security purpose. It's not the only one. I will paste here on the chat. I will paste here the URL for this, so you guys can test it. This web app allows you to test several attacks that are documented here at OWASP website, and it's fairly simple to implement. So I just created, as I've said, a web app, an app service, and then grab this code and upload the code to the root with the SFTP. Uploaded the code to the root of the web app. This has a MySQL database as a backend, and if you read the instructions of this setup, it's just changing 3 lines of code to point to the MySQL and provide the credentials so you can set it up. And afterwards, this is what you get. You have several types of attacks possible. You also have, within these attacks, you also have some pointers. Here you can see the source code. You can view the help to understand, if you don't know this type of attacks, to understand which actions you can do to exploit the site. And also one thing that's important, if you haven't noticed, I have here a security level. This security level allows me to change the web app behavior and allows me to go from the impossible hacking to the low, so that you can also, within a type of attack, you can also test or develop further your hacking skills and also your prevention skills. If you look at the code here, the source code, you will see, let me just put this maximize, you can see the source code running at local at this moment, and also the source code for other levels of security.
So basically, if I may interrupt, basically you can see unsanitized queries that are going directly to a database up to sanitized queries or prepared statements that are going to the database that are actually quite safe.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. You can see here, this is one of those queries. I'm just grabbing the ID from the input and just putting it there with no sanitization within the query. So as you can expect, this is prone to a SQL injection that we're going to show you guys in a few minutes. More. On this scenario, we also wanted to add some defense layer to the solution. So as I've said, we've created also this application gateway. This application gateway has web application firewall activated, and the application firewall is using OWASP rules. You can see here, if you enable this rule configuration, you can see here the rules that are defined at this level, OWASP 3.0, and you can understand better which kind of prevention detection this WAF can do. So taking it back to our hacker, Lord V, do you want to grab the session?
So let's see what he can do with this.
Okay, as you can see here, we have a form that lists the data for a user. So I can enter the user ID and also and grab the first name, surname of this user. But if you remember what I've shown you previously, that code wasn't sanitized, so we were passing to the query, we were passing the content of this text box. And as you can see, if we inject some SQL on that field,
basically wildcards,
and we are grabbing the entire user table stored on the system. We are not being destructive here, so we are just listing the contents. But as you can imagine, we could have created a more complex query and grab the schema, destroy the database, destroy tables, tamper with data, etc., etc. Now, going back to another different type of attack, this is a command injection. Also, the same kind of form, text form, it's performing an action. Actually, it's a ping on the device. You can relate this, for instance, for, I don't know, router interfaces, for instance. And our hacker is adding some command injection. And if you look here, you'll see we have the entire user table for the system. So if you know, the way to break an identity is two parts: break the user, break the password, or grab the tokens. And with this, injection, the first part is done. We already have the user tables for the website. At this moment, we are creating these attacks with the URL that's protected by the WAF. So all of this is currently being logged to a log analytics workspace. The log analytics workspace is a repo for the data collected by the WAF, and as we'll see, Azure Sentinel will also grab this out of the box. So that you guys understand, when we built this solution, we started with a web app, then we created the WAF, then we logged the WAF to a log analytics, and we can query that log analytics. And later on, we created the Sentinel and just connected the data connector, and Sentinel was able to grab all of the information that was already stored on that log analytics workspace. So this is a very modular approach. You can start small, and then we can grow to a more robust solution like Azure Sentinel. So I think we should go to the Sentinel and see what was logged.
All right. So let's see it on a perspective of workbooks. Like I said before, workbooks are what we use to see. It's a more an easier way to see what type of events are reaching us, and grab some KPIs as well, if we so desire. They can help us with investigations, they can help us with threat management, and even some risk assessment if you use the correct workbook. All workbooks are completely customizable. You can think of them as dashboards, if you will, but as Microsoft kindly does, we have quite a few templates that are created by the community and by Microsoft itself. Some of them created by the vendors that have all the intentions of integrating their solutions with the CM. So they always give you a good overview of what's happening. So if we go to the WAF Firewall Events, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to see a few interesting things. So I'm looking at the last 30 days. So this may be a little bit slower. Let me just go for the last hour. So we have a smaller sample size, and we have a faster loading time. And like we said, as you can see here, we can pretty much see what Lord V was doing. So these messages are raw messages coming from the WAF itself. These can and will generate incidents as well. All of them. Basically, we can see the command injections, the SQL injections, another SQL injection detected, an attempt to inject an OS file. Oh, I didn't catch that one. But basically, everything that he did is logged here. And even if we didn't have any type of incident management, or if we inherited WAF from another subscription, or if we are onboarding a new customer, we can always download the logs that are on cache. So if it was a WAF, it has at least, with the log analytics, it will have at least 30 days of data stored in it if the client didn't do anything. And we can just pick that up and analyze this workbook to see what type of things or interesting things are there, and we can list them. Well, you've been attacked quite a few times in the past, and there are a few things that we may need to talk about before proceeding with this implementation. So not only we can look and protect ourselves to the future, but we can actually look to the past and do some hunting as we will, and see what happened in that customer itself.
That's a very interesting point that you've touched there. Looking into the past. as you guys know, attacks usually start slow and they are difficult to detect. And to do a proper hunt on what happened and find the root causes, sometimes we have to go back a lot in time. So
Definitely.
log analytics and the default value of 30 days for security incidents, it's a very, very, very short amount of time.
Yes.
Usually I advise my customers to see if they can, cost-wise also, if they can up the value to at least 90 days or 120 days, so that if we need proper data, security data, we can go back more in time and look at the past, because you need to correlate things. You need to correlate identities, you need to correlate systems, you need to correlate IP addresses, etc., to try and find the breadcrumbs that takes you back to the root cause. As Miguel said, this is a data connector from Azure Sentinel, and it was out of the box. It was just going to the data connectors, say connect to this specific WAF and grab the data from there. And out of the box, you have these beautiful dashboards that can show you on a more easy to read way. It can show you the data. You could also query directly with Custo queries. You can also query directly the logs. It would be a lot painful to do, but it's the base. It's the base for the security events. Miguel, if you want to, I can grab your session and just show a quick query.
Go for it.
On that WAF.
Go for it.
Okay, so let me grab the session again. So this is my log analytics workspace. It's to this workspace that I'm logging, and I can show you where that was done. That I'm logging my diagnostic settings of the web app. You can see here. It's the AG to this log analytics workspace, and I'm logging everything from this WAF. Going back to the log analytics, we have here, I'm just going to load this to the editor. We have this Azure Diagnostics table where WAF stores all of the data, and looking at some more, I can do this and just select or filter the logs related to this application log gateway. And even if I wanted to grab a specific event, I could run this query. Let me just open up a little bit more. This is the query that shows SQL injections on this specific WAF. Okay, as you can see, we have the same information here.
Yeah.
And it's not that human readable, but like workbooks, but we can work with this. And as I've said, we can start small and then we can go up our solution to an Azure Sentinel. And also, if you don't want to use Sentinel, you can also create your own workbooks on top of this log analytics and use some of the same queries that's used by Sentinel to create some visuals.
You are touching a great point. I forgot to mention that the workbooks are 100% customizable, and they are subscription-wide if they support those types of queries. So anything that supports KQL or Custo query language, and is actually queryable, it can be put on a workbook. That means if you want to do cost analysis on your whole subscription on a workbook, you can definitely do that. If you want to see different types of log analytics subscriptions that are not ran by Azure Sentinel, you can definitely do that as well. So imagine if you have an IoT or an AI subscription and you want to have some metrics, or you want to see the events on a different type of views, so it's easier to operate or easier to analyze, you can definitely do that with a workbook as well.
I don't know, Miguel, if you're going to touch this, but I think it's useful. It's useful.
Yeah.
One of the things that you can now, it's in preview still, okay, but some previews of Microsoft, they are not that preview anymore, so you can use them, but be careful on production systems, okay? But you can now connect, can connect the Sentinel with your own repos on GitHub or Azure DevOps, so that you can, for instance, as Miguel was saying, grab those queries that means something to you, create your own workbooks, and then put them under source control and use them on your Azure Sentinel. These workbooks that you see here, that Miguel activated, these workbooks are from the Azure Sentinel repo on GitHub, but you can use your own workbooks, you can use your own queries and just load them up to Sentinel.
Another point, if you click on Content Hub, also a preview feature, I was talking about before having different vendors working actively with Microsoft nowadays to deploy their own solutions or their own out-of-the-box connectors. And as you can see here on the Content Hub, this is a preview feature. Vendors or authorized partners of Microsoft can actually develop different types of objects, let's put it like that, for Azure Sentinel that aren't actually already approved by the default templates. So these objects can contain playbooks, which means a playbook is an automation feature. They can contain data connectors, they can contain parsers. A parser is something that collects the data and shapes it to the language type used of the CM itself, so it can read the data on and use that data to our analytic rules. And they can have, well, anything, basically. Some of them are still considered a preview, so basically they are not very well developed. If you see preview and new, like you have this Oracle Cloud infrastructure, it's probably something that you need to be aware to use on production. Fair warning there. But the ones that are outside of preview, if they are not integrated yet on the default data connectors and analytics pages, it's just because of a time constraint, really. They can pretty much be used out of the box. It comes to a point that basically most vendors that are present on Azure Sentinel nowadays actually have an email address that you can shoot an email to ask for features on Azure Sentinel. Cisco has one, Palo Alto has another, those definitely do. Oh, VMware as well. And you can actually talk to their support team and actually help them out, develop a few features that are needed for your use cases or your usage. But yeah.
And also one thing that I think it's very important with these vendors is that they realize that to provide a better security posture for their customers, they need to collaborate and exchange fast enough, exchange information of security events, security attacks happening all over the world, right, Miguel? And taxi servers and Stix messages created a baseline for them to exchange that information to our systems.
And both of those can be integrated in the threat intelligence feature of Azure Sentinel or any other type of CM that consumes IOCs as well. But like Pedro was saying, there is a community-wide effort to push back against people like Lord V, because, well, the money is still there. He's going to keep doing what he's doing as long as it pays out quite generously. And mind you, we are not even talking about industrial espionage or threats like nation states or anything like that. That's out of the scope for this talk. But as long as petty criminals and normal hackers see a profit in doing what they're doing, and the risk, well, if you are based in a few countries, there's basically no risk unless you have systems in Europe or in America, North America, that is. You're probably scot-free of all type of consequences unless, well, if you are an hacker that decides to attack where the country that you are based on. Obviously, that's not a good idea. That's why you see some malware that doesn't run on specific idioms, by the way, and or specific region types of keyboards and stuff like that. But as long as you are based there, you pretty much have no risk. The worst that can happen is someone shuts down your proxy servers or your C2 servers or command and controls. And well, they just keep doing. If they do it to 1,000 people and one pays out, it's pretty much all profit. So the community is all in this together, and we need to push back to this epidemic.
Miguel, what do you say that we open the floor for questions?
That's a great idea.
So let me stop sharing. As you can see, we had only 3 slides of PowerPoint, so this whole session was devoted to show you guys technology and not just slidewares. And now we invite you guys to open the mic and just shoot some questions. If we don't know how to answer, we'll say it and we'll answer you guys offline for sure. So who comes first? I see Vasco here already ready to shoot a question for us.
I'm ready to fire up, but if someone wants to go first, just let me know.
You have to break the ice.
So since the audience is a little bit shy, I will break the ice. No problem. So Pedro and Miguel, thank you for the awesome presentation. Really cool to see this, and also Lord V to not do a lot of damage. So it was a little bit controlled today. Thank you for that. And my first question is, and it's for both of you. You can both respond, so with different point of views, if that's the case. So imagine that you guys are the business leaders of an organization, a common organization. It doesn't need to be in this particular industry, and as 99% of the organizations, your business depends on IT. Otherwise, in today's business, without IT, you probably will not be able to exist. So you hear about all these new things about ransomware attacks and companies losing billions of dollars and their data being exploited. And you have your own data center. You have a bunch of IT guys that are managing that infrastructure. You trust them, of course. You know them for several years. But how would you be concerned about your own survival? Would you think that I'm protected, I don't need to do anything, or what would be your next move?
I can start. One thing that we have to realize is that attackers are always ahead of our systems. So I tend to think I'm not protected at all times. I have to think about what can I do to improve my security controls? What do I have to do to give my teams? You said that we had our own infrastructure, that we had our own IT teams. The IT teams needs training and the IT teams needs tooling to do the job. But better than having the tools and having the training for our internal ITs, I need to have partners where I can trust to help me grow my security awareness. Okay, I know this sounds very commercial, for sure.
It
It is, but let me explain why. Is my line of business IT? Yes or no? If it's not, if it's, for instance, manufacturing, I might have an internal IT team and I host my own systems, but security relies on a very specific expertise and relies constant knowledge, constant training, constant learning. Can my IT team, my small IT team, have the time to learn properly? To no, it's very difficult.
And actually, Pedro, to be also always ahead of the curve, as you said.
Yeah,
hackers do this at the full-time job, so they are always trying to exploit new vulnerabilities. So how can a medium-sized organization with an IT team be able to take care of the systems and also take enough time to invest in training and protecting those systems to always be ahead of potential attacks? It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it's that's the point. So you need to rely also on your partners and rely on the teams that are like Miguel's team. They are constantly learning and seeing new types of attacks, exploring new ways of provide security, and they can do mentoring on those IT teams and not also implement the tools, but also help the learning growth of those teams.
Okay.
Yeah, like I usually say, hackers only need to get right once. The defenders need to get it right every time. Just from this statement alone, you see how lopsided the competition is. And as someone that manages a SOC that is quite sizable, we have people constantly in training as well, because every single day lurking, and training can be in a security standpoint, it can be even lurking forums, lurking news, and lurking where hackers actually lurk as well, because being ahead of the curve is actually a full-time job as well. And it's hard for a mid-sized enterprise to justify the cost of having people dedicated to that whole proposition. But the thing is, hackers, talking from an offensive standpoint, putting another hat like Lord V squares. If I'm a hacker, I'm going to attack the low-hanging fruit first. So I'm going to look for exposed ports. I'm going to look open remote desktop connections. I'm going to look for exposed web apps, stuff like that. And the thing is, can a mid-sized enterprise guarantee that they are not vulnerable to these common attacks or these common threat vectors? Do they have specialized people or good enough people that can actually assure them that these vectors are closed? I would say that either they have a specialized team or it can be quite hard to guarantee that. So that's where a business like ours comes in.
And Miguel, they could have a specialized team, but it's the team needs to be involved in security.
Definitely.
24/7.
24/7. The hackers don't stop.
They don't, the hackers, they also sleep, but they are
Hackers sleep.
they work at their shift. It can be at night, it can be at day.
Exactly.
So
But Vasco, hackers sleep, bots don't.
yeah,
So
exactly.
bots keep going. It doesn't matter. They don't have a time zone to care about. So sure, the hacker will look at the bot and see results or potential vulnerable value for potential vulnerable targets, or even more sophisticated groups have bots that do the first implantation. So basically, they inject a Trojan or an implant on the target systems that are vulnerable, or they do that by sending massive waves of phishing campaigns that actually have malware injected on it. You had a very famous one called TrickBot that's already being identified by pretty much any type of EDR and CM. But TrickBot mostly was deployed by random PDFs and Excel files that people opened on their emails. And the hackers are not doing that by hand. They just
of course.
do a massive wave of phishing, and oh look, there's my Christmas tree lighting up lights and see vulnerable targets. Let's try this one today. And
So okay, Miguel. So you both guys touch in a particular aspect, which is people. It's people, not platforms
people,
or infrastructure or tools. It's people, and my question is, to be ahead of the curve for a regular organization, medium-sized organization, that would be a massive investment in hiring the number of people to have 24/7 services, and also to keep investing on training them so they can be ahead. So it doesn't seem like on a financial perspective that would be an interesting business case for most of the organizations, because that would cost a lot of money.
It will. But the thing is, you need to consider two things. You're definitely correct. It's people. Nowadays, security, the modern security or cybersecurity, if you will, is definitely information and people nowadays. It's aggregating information to make sure you know what's happening, and having people trained to actually parse what happened, and actually have the other type of people, the users, the common users, trained enough so they are not a security risk to your organization. And what you need to consider is, if imagine we have a mid-sized enterprise in the industry sector that we produce, I don't know, sausages or something like that. What's the cost of having a ransomware and stopping my factories for 2 weeks? How much would that cost? Is it greater than having everybody on staff trained for basic cybersecurity training, having dedicated people looking at these logs, having a MSSP looking at these services? Spoiler, it's probably a lot cheaper to do this.
Sorry to interrupt you, Miguel. And there's a costs that's sometimes slipped by decisions' minds, that are the costs of reputation.
Yeah, reputation is definitely a big one as well. Depending on the sector, it depends on the sector as well.
Yeah, also. But if you think about the SolariGate case that happened last year, it was a huge blow on a company's reputation, and that company relied on selling IT solutions.
Exactly.
But if you go to other lines of business, as a customer of that company, if there's a data breach, I'm going to be concerned about my data as a customer. So what damage will a breach do to my reputation as a company?
There are legal fines to consider as well, because we are in Europe, we are under the RGPD umbrella. So if something is not disclosed correctly, or if something is not handled properly, well, those fines are not a joke at all.
So would you say that, and going back to the original comment of Pedro, when he said I would work with a partner, and it could be Claranet, it could be a different partner. It doesn't need to be Claranet. We are Of course, we are good in what we do, but we are not the only ones to do it. So your number one suggestion is go to a partner which has the right credentials that you can trust, and let them take a part in your cybersecurity strategy. Okay.
Yes,
and
that's
that
definitely
would
it.
cost a fraction of the cost that you would have if you were wanted to do it on your own. So
Yes,
on a
most likely,
financial
yes.
analysis, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a lot cheaper as well than having to respond to,
Absolutely.
a
Absolutely.
full stop
Because
of production as well.
partners like Claranet, which has their own SOC, can work at scale. So it will not charge 24/7 teams to each of the customers. So that's a no-brainer. So we talk about people, and we just have only 5 minutes. I want to talk about platforms, or the places where you can host your infrastructure. What considering that you don't have constraints about data sovereignty, latency, what would be your decision if to select a place or a platform to host your applications? And I'm talking specific about cybersecurity. Where would be, and please don't say names like Azure, AWS, or Google, but it could be public cloud, private cloud, or on-prem. Okay, but what would be your first choice to host your applications, considering only a cybersecurity strategy, or the place where you consider you will be most protected?
Well,
Miguel, you can go first.
the place you are most protected. Nowadays, honestly, it's kind of, let me answer that question in two parts. It depends on how you define safety and what we are trying to keep safe. So basically, both public clouds like Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud Engine, the way you operate them with serverless structures and even thick servers, they can be well configured to be protected from external threats. The thing is, when you are talking about stuff like serverless connections or serverless apps, or if you have any type of middleware inside of it, or an orchestrator that manages it, you may be increasing your surface area of possible vulnerabilities. So there are some people that use Kubernetes, for example, were made aware of a few vulnerabilities last year that were quite severe. But on the other side, if you are on-prem and if you host everything on vSphere from VMware, you are also aware that there were a few major vulnerabilities on those systems as well. So what I'm trying to say,
Miguel, just to help you answer your question, I'm going to limit the scope. You have your own business and your applications run on VMs, and you don't have a plan to transform them or evolve them to serverless or any other thing. And you can host VMs on-prem, private cloud, or public cloud. Which is the safer place to protect those VMs?
I would say,
which is the place that will give you more tools so you can better protect them?
More tools? Well, with if you're thinking about cost as well, it's definitely nowadays the public cloud. You have quite a few options that can help you protect it, and very cost inexpensive. But the thing is, if you want completeness of tools, that's still on a virtual machine environment on-prem, on a data center. But the thing is, the costs there can get out of control really quickly.
Yeah.
So
but
there's a duality there.
But there's also a different aspect. It's not just about tools. It's just about how well protected the physical environment it is.
Well, you'll need you have to ask yourself: do you have the same security resources that a Microsoft or Amazon has or Google has to protect your data centers or your physical accesses? Can you guarantee you have the same standards? If you are talking about physical security, there are those things that you need to consider as well, obviously. But talking about a logical point of view only, there's definitely a case to be made on public cloud to ease of access and ease of configuration versus completeness of tool set from on-prem solutions. Again, if you want to be competitive, the costs will increase really quickly, though.
Okay, thank you. Pedro, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, from my perspective, and I was born on-prem a lot of years ago, and now I'm cloud first, all in. It's impossible for you, without spending a lot of money, to have the same level of security on a data center on-prem that you have on the cloud. And if you have doubts about it, just search for the security certifications that public cloud vendors, I'm not saying Azure, Azure, AWS, even though the lists of Azure is humongous, it's impossible for you to have that kind of security on your data center. Also, I privilege the flexibility of cloud. If you want a more controlled environment and not a data center somewhere in the world that you don't know where that data center exists, then I would search for a private cloud, something that's more near to me, a partner that's closer to me as a possibility, and not on-prem infrastructure. For me, I think the roadmap is going towards the cloud and lessen our footprint on-prem systems. I know it's difficult; it's a long way to go.
That being said, it's also fair to say that there are some workloads, some particular cases where you cannot host it in the private cloud outside of your perimeter. So it needs to be on-prem, and I'm referring specifically to manufacturing, where you need to have some applications controlling the factory, the factory floor. So those kind of applications, they typically don't have sensitive data. So the sensitive data, the business data, could be hosted in public cloud or in the private cloud, but you also can have some things on-prem because, well, public cloud, it's not the answer for everything, right? So probably a hybrid model would be the best.
And you mentioned something, just to finish, you mentioned something that's really important. Those systems on-prem, they don't have sensitive data, but they do control the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they control the manufacturing floor, if they are targeted, then they can stop. You need to protect them also.
Absolutely. So having things in different places, it's also expands the scope of cybersecurity, because you need to protect everything. So
it makes it more fun for us. Well, it's more challenging for us because we design, we architecture the solutions. It's more challenging, and we do like challenges. That's why we do the work that we do.
Yes, it's been awesome. We unfortunately run out of time, but I promise that we'll make this presentation available for all of the people that have registered but were unable to be here today. And thank you a lot, Pedro, Miguel, and Lord V, for this awesome presentation. And we'll see you back again very soon in the next Cloud Activate. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks.